We look at what Eric DeCosta had to say during his 2022 Scouting Combine press conference and more next year on Locked On Ravens.
You are Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
And we return here with another episode of Locked On Ravens, your daily Baltimore Ravens podcast. I am your host, Kevin Allstriker of Ravenswire. Of course, we are here on the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We're free and available on all platforms. And thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen of the day. We're here on a Thursday, the day after Eric DeCosta, the Ravens general manager, spoke to the media at the 2022 NFL Scouting Combine. A ton of great tidbits that he got into in regards to Lamar Jackson, Calais Campbell, some of the Ravens draft prospects that they've drafted in recent years and those trends that they've used, as well as a little bit of how DeCosta feels about some of the other positions in the draft this time around. So there's a ton to get into. So we're going to dive into DeCosta's press conference takeaways in the second segment. In the first segment, Thursday actually does mark the first day of field drills, of on-field drills for certain positional groups. Now, how it's going to work, and we'll dive into this in the first segment, is these guys are going to be going in positional groups of 3 or 2. It's going to be 3 today and then 2 for the rest of the time in terms of what the NFL has on their site. So we'll dive into that in the first segment. And then in the final segment, we'll dive into more of your Twitter mock drafts. Again, we didn't get to all of them on Monday, didn't get to all of them yesterday. I'm going to try to get to as many as I can. I'm not sure I'm going to be able to dive through them all this week, but I do look at all of them. I do, and I greatly appreciate everybody who does submit them. And if you don't hear yours right out this week, be sure to submit another one that we're going to put out a tweet on Sunday there. So let's dive into the content here. Before we do that, though, we're on YouTube and we're growing. We're growing fast. We are on the grind to 1,000 subscribers. We're very close at this point. So if you haven't subscribed already, you're thinking about it, yeah, I'd greatly appreciate it if you didn't. Again, thank you to everybody who's already subscribed. I really appreciate that. We're on YouTube 5 days a week, much like we are in audio form 5 days a week. It's the same show, so you're not missing anything if you're listening on one platform versus the other. If you're in audio form on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, you're getting the same thing as you're getting on YouTube, but on YouTube, you can see my face and my background. It premieres at 6 a.m. Eastern time, and you can live chat as the show is going on. So as I'm making a point here, you can say hi or something. The show, as points get taken, you can chat in that community and put comments down. So again, thank you to everybody. Also, be sure to follow me on Twitter at CashRacket34 and the Locked On Ravens account at Locked On Ravens. So let's dive into this content here today, and let's just get into what the Combine is this year, because it kind of fluctuates every single year. Things get changed. Things are put on differently. So I just want to let people be aware, and I'm sure some people do know this already, but just what the drills are or what positional groups are going. So today, Thursday, the tight ends, the quarterbacks, and the wide receivers will be doing their drills. And then on Friday, you have the offensive linemen and the running back. Saturday, defensive linemen and linebackers. And then on Sunday, you got PK and DBs. You got the DBs. That's a big one, especially for how deep this cornerback class is. I'm really looking forward to Sunday in the DB class. But I think overall, there's a lot to look forward to in this combine, and we've previewed it for the past couple of weeks here. We talked about it with Spencer Schultz last Tuesday, talked about it with Spencer Schultz this past Tuesday. So if you want to check out those combine preview shows, go back and watch them. They're really good. Spencer gives a lot of good points there. We talked a bit about some players to watch for the Ravens in the combine this year as well. A ton of those also. So if you want to watch yesterday's show, we have that up as well. But overall, I think the combine is people have different opinions of it, right? Some people think it is severely overhyped and overrated. Other people think it doesn't get enough credit for some of the players it produces, putting that in air quotes. I mean, combine tests can make or break players' draft slots. They can catapult them up into the first round, send them down into the day 2s, day 3s, put a guy above a position or a guy at his position group below a guy at his position group. There are a lot of different ways that the combine can alter where guys are drafted. And for the Ravens, who hold the 14th pick, some of those top end talent guys, like, for example, I talked about this yesterday. Derek Stingley, who was one of my favorite corners in this class, him and Sauce Gardner are my top two. Sauce Gardner's participating in this combine. And if he runs a fast 40, if he shows out at the other tests and the other drills, a lot of people, some people have Sauce number one. I know a lot of people have Derek Stingley number one. But if Sauce has a great testing day, he can catapult ahead of Stingley. And then for the Ravens, they could get a player who was once a consensus number one at his position at 14. Like that's crazy stuff there. I mean, you look at guys like Trayvon Walker, David Ajabo. Those are guys we talked about yesterday of who to watch for the Ravens, because as we'll talk about in the second segment, Eric DeCosta talked a bit about some of those positional groups, offensive line in particular, which was or is a huge need for the Ravens. So this is a huge 4-day stretch for these players to put their skills on display. Now, this isn't the only way they can do that. There are still pro days. There are interviews. The Ravens have talked to some offensive linemen, and we'll get into that in the second segment. But there are a lot of things at stake here for a lot of prospects and a lot of things at stake for a lot of teams. I mean, this is the part of draft season that I think as recent years have gone on, the combine has lost a bit of its shine. And what I mean by that is I don't think people value it as much. Now, there are a bunch of people who put everything in the combine. I'm not saying that has gone away and that the combine is irrelevant. I personally think the combine is important. I think it's a way to figure out how guys test. And certain drills give not just the black and white, oh, this guy's fast because he ran the 40 fast. At the 40, you can look at acceleration, get off. There's a ton of different things in every drill that's not just, oh, he's fast or, oh, he's strong. Everything combines and kind of all interweaves into one. And so when looking at offensive line or corner or edge or some of those positions that the Ravens clearly have needs in, and there are clearly top players, Trevor Penning, Trent McDuffie, two players who I said yesterday I would trade down for to pick in the first round right now. If you want to see my reasoning, yesterday's show, I put that all in there. But there's a lot of players right now who, let's say Trevor Penning tests out of this world, like amazing. Then my stance might change. Other people's stance might change. The consensus might change. And then you might see Trevor Penning go in the top 14, 15, some of those. And that's like the consensus. Oh, hey, that's a good pick right now. But if the Ravens were to pick him at 14 right now, I don't really know how I'd feel about that. My favorite offensive tackle in this class or offensive lineman in this class is Ike Ekwonu out of NC State. Evan Neal's a very top prospect. But, I mean, look, the Ravens probably aren't touching those guys. Those are probably two top 5 players. So then you're looking at other players like Trevor Penning and Charles Cross and a couple other guys like that who, if they have stellar days, that could catapult them. Like Charles Cross catapults him maybe into the top 7 or 8, and Penning maybe into the top 12, 14, 15. Those are all huge things to keep an eye on at this combine. But so for today, and obviously for the next 4 days, we're going to have people testing. And today is the tight ends, quarterbacks, and wide receivers. So not a necessarily huge day for the Ravens today. I mean, wide receiver, they could certainly look. I mean, Justin Ross is an under the radar guy who is going, I think, a lot later than he should. The consensus wide spot for him, I think, is a bit too low. So maybe there's that. I mean, there are other players as well. And look, I was convinced the Ravens weren't going to take 2 wide receivers in 2021. And look what they did. They took 2 wide receivers in 2021. So there's always that surprise factor. And maybe the Ravens take a wide receiver early in this draft because there are very talented ones. I mean, the Ravens probably aren't getting guys like Drake London, Chris Olave, et cetera, but there are some later round guys who I think could be fits for them. Tight ends, a position that I think the Ravens will look to get into. I mean, Chikakonkwo out of Maryland is a player who a lot of people like, and he could be a later round option for him. So tight ends, quarterbacks, wide receivers today at the combine, and then throughout the rest of the week into the weekend. And throughout the weekend, there will be tests for the rest of that stretch. But we still have a lot to talk about here on Locked On Ravens, getting into Eric DeCosta and what he had to say to the media on Wednesday. A ton of great takeaways as well. So we'll jump into that very soon. But first, let me tell you a bit about Bet Online. And so, although football might be over, basketball is in full swing for both pro and college hoops. And for me, as a Denver Nuggets fan, I watched the Nuggets take a brutal loss to the Oklahoma City Thunder last night. It was their worst loss of the season. If you bet the overs on any of their starters hitting three-pointers, I apologize because the Nuggets did not hit any three-pointers. Their starters did not hit any three-pointers until the last minute of the game. They were 0 for over 20. It was not great, but there's still a lot of odds on Bet Online to choose from, and it's from all the latest odds, totals, and player performance props, even to where the next fired coach is going to land. Bet Online is the number one spot for all your sports betting needs. It does remain the best spot for all your sports scores, podcasts, and news this season. And also, it's not just basketball. Hockey is there, boxing, you have UFC odds, and you also have Olympic coverage and information as well. And it's really easy to get started. You can just go to the website. You can use your mobile device as well. It's not just website driven. You can learn more about the trends in action from all different sports, including the NFL, which should have odds trickling in over the next couple of weeks, couple of months, of course. But BetOnline is a place to do it. BetOnline, where the game starts. We're back here with our second part of Locked On Ravens. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And of course, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen every day, but also make sure you're following Locked On NFL, Locked On Experts, covering the biggest stories around the NFL every Monday through Friday in less than 30 minutes. Of course, just like Locked On Ravens, it's free and available wherever you get your podcasts. And we're going to now talk about Eric DeCosta and what he had to say to the Baltimore media on Wednesday. Well, actually, not just Baltimore media, all media on Wednesday, as he is at the Combine, scouting out these players, figuring out who's going to be the next great batch of Baltimore Ravens. So a lot of things were brought up to him. Obviously, one of the bigger points that he talked about was the Lamar Jackson contract. And look, honestly, I think he is dead tired of answering this question. I mean, he's been asked it so many times in so many different types of ways. And look, I mean, it's the media's due diligence to ask these types of things. I mean, I'm not like blaming the media or anything for asking it, but it feels like he's just so tired of answering it. But he was asked about just any potential progress or what's going on with the Lamar Jackson extension. And he said that he hopes so. And at some point that he will, the Ravens hope that they will get something done. And he said that they've discussed it at length. And he said, I said this before, quote, we will work at Lamar Jackson's urgency. So he and I had ongoing discussions. We talked fairly recently as well. He knows how to find me. I know how to find him. I was very happy to see him working out on the West Coast recently with some of our guys. That's exciting and something we really think will help us this year be the very best team we can be. He's a guy that when we think about the Ravens 3, 4, 5 years from now, we envision Lamar being a very, very big part of that team and definitely a player that can help us win Super Bowls. So it's a big commitment for both the Ravens and Lamar Jackson when and if this deal gets done, right? This will shatter Joe Flacco's contract that he earned himself, right? He earned that contract by betting on himself and winning the Super Bowl. And obviously we know what happens with quarterbacks who win the Super Bowl in contract years. They get a little bit of money, just a tiny, tiny bit of money. But look, it seems like Lamar Jackson on the very low end, probably pushing $35 million, right? That's probably, he's going to get a lot more than that. And I think he deserves more than that. You're probably looking at 40, 45, 50, depending. And that's average annual value, depending on what happens. And it feels like to me, I'm not saying Lamar Jackson isn't, ready to get this thing done and wants to get the deal done, but I think he might be waiting because what realistically happened in the 2021 season started off great, right? I mean, we talked about it here before, literally was like this MVP candidate through the first, the Indianapolis game was his signature MVP moment, bringing that team back, having that amazing stat line, the pictures all over Twitter and everything. But then you head to Miami, and that game was just the beginning of the end for Lamar Jackson and his season. I mean, struggled ever since that game, missed the Chicago game with a non-COVID illness, then obviously falls with that ankle injury, and that's the end of his season. People have that in their minds. The NFL is, what have you done for me now lately league. People remember what you do recently. It's not like, oh, hey, like people, obviously they remember what Lamar Jackson was in 2019 and what he was in 2020, but he is still growing. He is still evolving as a football player. And, 2019, it wasn't 6 months ago. It wasn't a year ago. We're pushing a couple of years here now. So people remember that stretch of starting at the Miami game and obviously him not playing. And that's not the pinnacle of Lamar Jackson. That is not the Lamar Jackson that everybody knows he can be, that he has shown that he can be. So I think that this is a situation where Lamar Jackson might just want to bet on himself. Now, maybe the Ravens and Lamar Jackson do get a deal done this offseason. It wouldn't shock me. The thing that would shock me, to be honest, is if they agreed to a deal in season. I think that would be very rare, but you could be seeing Lamar Jackson work under the franchise tag next season. You could see an extension happen after the season as well. But the realistic factor of this is Lamar Jackson, if he wins a Super Bowl, will earn himself tens, maybe even something around 50, 60, whatever $million in total. That's a huge amount of money that, right now where Lamar Jackson, he got injured and he struggled in the back half of the season. That might be on the Ravens' minds a little bit and saying, we don't want to offer the full amount that we could maybe offer if you win the Super Bowl or won another MVP. So I think, look, if Lamar Jackson wants to bet on himself, I'm completely okay with that. He'll deserve every penny of whatever deal he gets. And look, it's going to be a big deal, regardless of if he signs it now, signs it in a couple months, in a year, whoever he signs it with as well, he's going to earn that contract. But DeCosta pretty much was like, yeah, we'll work at Lamar Jackson's pace, his urgency. He said that before and he said it again. So let's also talk about Calais Campbell a little bit, because Campbell is somebody who announced during the Super Bowl, or I guess said during the Super Bowl, that he is not retiring. He said that he is still going to play, still wants to play. And, I think the site of the Super Bowl, he wants to get there. And look, if there's a player who deserves to win the Super Bowl, kind of going out with a bang, obviously the Ravens did with Ray Lewis and Matt Burke, but obviously Eric Weddle did it too. Calais Campbell's another one on that list where I would love to see him win a Super Bowl, and especially do it in a Baltimore Ravens uniform. No Browns or Steelers or Bengals type deal. Let's get him in a Ravens uniform to do that. But DeCosta was asked about if he had any communication with Campbell, and he said that they exchanged text messages and didn't want to speak for Campbell himself. But DeCosta said, quote, "Listen, if you want to play, I'd like you to let me know at some point because we thought you had a good year. You're a good player." And that's what he texted to Campbell. And also he said, quote, "I have a lot of admiration for Calais as a person and as a player and as a leader. So I'm hopeful that we can bring him back. I'd love to bring him back. He's a guy that plays winning football, and he does as much for the team and the organization in the building as he does off the field. So I have a lot of respect for him." Or no, that says on the field. So I have a lot of respect for him. So yeah, off the field, on the field, Calais Campbell is a phenomenal person, player, whatever you want to say. He's also still a high-level player. I mean, he's ranked in the top 40 of PFF's top free agents this offseason. And obviously, take PFF for what you will. There are PFF truthers. There are PFF non-truthers. And I know they've had their debates about what Patrick Queen is at this stage of his career. But Campbell is still a high-level player, contributed to the Ravens' top-ranked rush defense in 2021. Can still generate a bit of interior pressure when asked, but really that's not, or at least he didn't do it over his first couple of years in Baltimore at a high clip. But Campbell's a nice veteran to have. He seemed to love his time in Baltimore. I'd be all on board with him coming back to the Ravens and trying to get that Super Bowl ring with the team. I think that he deserves it. And the Ravens, I mean, look, they give him a good shot to do it. I mean, it's not like he's coming into a true, like, oh, this team really went 8-9 at full strength and they're rebuilding. I mean, no, the Ravens are getting reinforcements. And I think that will go a long way in terms of maybe where Campbell decides to play his next stage of football. And hopefully it will be coming back to Baltimore. But DeCosta also talked about the offensive line class this year. And there are a lot of top offensive linemen. He was asked about evaluating those top offensive linemen. And he said, quote, "If you look at this draft class, you're going to have, in my opinion, some really outstanding offensive linemen for sure. You've got a guy like Evan Neal, who we met last night, extremely impressive what he did at Alabama. He's imposing, physical, strong, a run blocker. He has a chance to be an outstanding pro. Another guy, Charles Cross, offensive tackle, again, just an outstanding athlete. He looks like a power forward out there in pass protection. He's, again, a guy I think that's very, very gifted." He also talked about Tyler Linderbaum and said that he kind of draws some comparisons to Marshall Yanda, but he said tough, gritty, very, very athletic, very intelligent, and smart. And he also gave him the praise of saying that he could be the centerpiece of your offensive line. He said that. So a lot of top guys in this draft. I talked about Ike Ekwonu. The Ravens met with Evan Neal. The Ravens aren't touching him at 14. They're going to have to trade up and trade a king's ransom to move up for a guy like Evan Neal. But hey, if the Ravens want to get the number 1 overall pick and make a splash, then there you go. It might just cost them a ton. So there are options. It's not just Neal or Ekwonu. Cross is somebody who realistically, like if there's a team that needs an offensive lineman and Ekwonu and Neal are off the board, Cross is probably my next guy off. Kenyon Green is another option who's very versatile, can play both in and out. We talked about Trevor Penning also, but it feels like the Ravens want to get an offensive lineman early. And the thing with this class is that you have like the top 7 to 9 guys, especially at tackle. This is for tackle. They're like 7 to 9 top guys. Then you have like 1 or 2 solid guys, and then there's a pretty big drop off. I'm not saying those guys at the bottom there aren't talented, but for what the Ravens need, they need to make sure that they have a contingency plan in place for Ronnie Stanley and figuring out a bunch of things of that nature. So I think it would not shock me to see them take an offensive lineman in the first 2 rounds and maybe even 2 offensive linemen over the first 2 days with their first, second, or third round picks. So DeCosta, a lot of high praise for some of these top offensive linemen in this draft. And then kind of the final thing we'll dive into from what DeCosta had to say on Wednesday to the media is he talked a little bit about Mike McDonald and what he would bring to the Ravens and said, quote, "We're fortunate with Mike McDonald that he has a history with us. He kind of grew up in the NFL with us, so he understands the culture. I think the scheme is going to be very similar to what we've been doing. We have some changes along the way, and those changes may manifest themselves in terms of how we call the defense or how guys line up and different things. But we've been good on defense for a long time. I think we understand as an organization what it takes to be good on defense and the type of player that we're looking for. Mike's been with us, and he'll be a big part of that." And so, yeah, the consistency there, I think DeCosta was trying to make a huge point of that and saying that, McDonald is – he spent a lot of time with the Ravens before moving on to Michigan, and that's huge, having that organizational experience, if that's what you want to call it. And now coming back to the Ravens after flourishing on his own away from the organization, I think that's a big step of where it's not just like, oh, he's only in the Ravens ideals and that's all he knows. Like he went and he had a ton of success at a huge college program and turned their defense around. So now coming back to Baltimore, a ton of talented pieces at his disposal. I'm with DeCosta. I think it's going to be a very huge addition for them. And on their coaching staff, they now have a guy who isn't going to completely change the defense and like gut the defensive scheme, but it will help them as they move forward, have some familiarity, as well as implement some new things along the way, some small tweaks, some maybe big tweaks that will work for them and cater more to their personnel. But we're going to head into our final break. We still have a lot more to cover here on Locked On Ravens, getting into your mock drafts from Twitter. So we're going to dive into that on the other side here next on Locked On Ravens. We return here with our final part of Locked On Ravens, final segment. Kevin Oestreicher, your host, still here with you. And again, thank you for making Locked On Ravens your first listen every day. It does mean a ton to me. Tomorrow, we're going to be diving into more Ravens talk as we round out this week, but make your second listen Locked On NFL Draft. Ryan Tracy and former NFL cornerback Eric Crocker bring the NFL Draft to life every day with insight and analysis on college football prospects and NFL front offices. It's free and available wherever you get your podcasts, much like the show you're listening to right now in Locked On Ravens. But let's dive into some of these mock drafts. We've done a lot of these over the past couple of days, and I do want to get to as many as we can here before the show is out today. So let's talk now about a mock draft from OJ. We'll start with OJ here, who has the Ravens taking Kyle Hamilton. Look at this, a safety at number 14. Darion Kendrick, corner from Georgia at 45. Daniel Falele, offensive tackle at 76. Chad Muma, linebacker with Wyoming at 99. Michael Clemens, defensive lineman from Texas A&M at 108. Another Texas A&M defensive lineman in Jaden Peavy at 117. Tyreek Smith, edge from Ohio State at 126. Mario Goodrich, corner from Clemson at 138. Obina Ize, I might have said that wrong. I apologize. Offensive tackle out of TCU, 140, and Austin Allen, tight end from Nebraska at 194. Now, let me say, Kyle Hamilton, that's a guy I'd trade up for. I don't think I mentioned him, or maybe I did. I can't remember on yesterday's show. But that's a player who I would absolutely trade up for in this draft. Because, look, I believe that Hamilton is a very versatile piece, can do a lot of different things. The Ravens are in the market for a safety, it appears. And Hamilton, I mean, these first 3 picks are phenomenal. You have Kyle Hamilton, Darion Kendrick, and Daniel Falele. I think that the Ravens with Falele in general, that's a player who I think is going in the second round, could honestly move up into the first, depending on what his testing numbers look like. Kyle Hamilton, I think, is going top 5, top 10, so I don't think he's going to touch 14. And Kendrick is someone who I have kind of like a high-ish to mid day 2 grade on. So that this is around the area I think he would go in, but this is a secondary based draft, but it also addresses needs elsewhere. The Ravens have had so much success with drafting those mid-round defensive linemen. So getting two at 108 and 117 back to back and pairing up Michael Clemens and Jaden Peavy with another Texas A&M alum in Justin Madubuike. That'd be something there. So I think that the Ravens get a haul here. This solves some of their secondary issues that they have, and also Mario Goodrich is at 138, who I think is a very underrated prospect here. Maybe instead of Goodrich, who I do like, maybe a running back, depending on what happens in free agency. Maybe the Ravens get a center as well instead of a corner. But the edge position is really the one that is a tiny bit neglected, but I don't see a problem with taking Tyreek Smith. It's just a matter of, again, what happens in free agency, and it's going to really depend on some of those things that go on over the next couple of weeks as we get into that. But yeah, I like this mock draft a lot. Let's get into now a mock draft by Ben Jackson, who has a trade. We got a trade back here, and this only has the first 3 rounds, it looks like. So the Ravens trade pick 14 to the Pittsburgh Steelers. Oh, a rivalry trade here. All right. 14 to Pittsburgh, and the Ravens get 20 and 52. The Ravens take Trent McDuffie. There we go. Trent McDuffie at 20, the corner out of Wisconsin. Leo Chenal, Wisconsin linebacker at 46. Travis Jones, there he is, defensive lineman out of Connecticut at 52. Tyler Smith, tackle from Tulsa at 78. And Boye Mafe, edge at 102 from Minnesota. Now, McDuffie's a player who I said I would trade down for in yesterday's show. And here's a scenario where you get a very, very good player while picking up an extra second-round pick that you can use on a defensive lineman. This kind of clean sweeps the needs pretty much. I mean, not completely, obviously, but you get a corner, you get a linebacker, which depending on what happens in free agency and where the versatility is, where you need it, you can do that. Defensive line, obviously a need. Tackle, obviously a very big need. An edge, a need as well. So this is a very balanced mock draft, but I love the trade back here. Trading back, I mean, look, literally 6 picks and picking up an extra mid-second round pick. I mean, look, that's a trade I'm doing 10 times out of 10. Now, the Steelers part of it hurts a little if they get a top-tier prospect out of that, but you got to do what's best for your team, and I think that would be one of the best-case scenarios that the Ravens can put on there for sure. Well, let's talk now about a mock draft from Michael Godfrey, who says, my first time trying one of these this year, it felt really weird not feeling obligated to pick a wide receiver or 2. Yeah, the Ravens are taking 2 wide receivers in each of the last 3 drafts. So kind of different this year. David Ajabo, 14, the edge rusher. 45, you got Daniel Falili, offensive tackle. Darian Beavers, linebacker at 76. Jake Ferguson, tight end at 99. Mikael Wright, corner at 108. Kobe Bryant, corner at 117. Nick Cross, safety at 126. Ayoma Uwazurike, interior defensive lineman at 138. Otito Ogbonna, interior defensive lineman at 140. And Alex Wright, edge at 194. Yeah, Ajabo Falele, that combination I like a lot. I tried to get that combination in my actual mock draft I did on Mock Draft Monday, but he was taken. Falele was taken. So I like the 1-2 punch there. High quality edge rusher, high quality tackle. You take the linebacker at 76. You get the tight end at 99. Now, this is interesting, though, because there are 2 corners taken back-to-back here, plus 2 defensive linemen taken back-to-back here. So you have 108 and 117 for corners and 138 and 140 for interior defensive linemen. I might switch that up. And look, it depends how the board falls, right? This is how the board fell. These are the best prospects that Michael wanted here. But if I can get maybe, let's see, like a defensive lineman at 117 and then a corner at 140. So you're kind of rotating there. I think that might be a bit better. So you get more of that top-ish end talent while also addressing the needs. Then you can circle back and say in the later rounds, oh, this is the best player available. We already drafted a guy at that position, but hey, that's the best player, so let's go with it. I think that's maybe what I do, but I like this a lot. Again, the 1-2 punch I talked about, drafted Jake Ferguson in one of my mocks, Nick Cross as well, Ajabo obviously, so some guys that we've talked about. I think this is a great draft, and let's now get into a mock draft from Eduardo Flores, who says number 14 and number 45 can immediately start at center and right tackle. Protect LJ for the next few years to come. Number 76 can take over the MLB role for the next couple of years and is a proven leader for a championship team, a tad bit bigger than Malik Harrison, and provides quality depth for the position. Number 99, hopefully can develop as a quality outside linebacker between Bowser Owe and provides defensive coordinator Mike McDonald with versatility, ceiling like ties, Bowser floor like. Tim Williams. Ooh, Tim Williams. 108, lengthy corner that can learn from one of the best CB duos in the NFL, provides great depth to a position that needs it. 117, has the most explosive runs in college football this past season at 10 plus yards. If JK and Gus rehab successfully, can be a great compliment to the running back room. 126 has upside to be B. Williams 2.0 and predominantly a zero tech run stopper. Again, brings depth and youth to an aging defensive line group. 138, one of the highest graded offensive tackles in the draft that experience on either side, can compete to start on day one if Ronnie Stanley is 100%. Fingers crossed, yes. Otherwise, backup swing tackle like P. McCary isn't too bad either. 140, personally, safety isn't priority for the team. Nick Cross, highly versatile player, tremendous upside who can learn behind starters to become Ravens future free safety if they forego re-signing Chuck Clark in the next couple of years. 194, I see a tight end being Nick Boyle 2.0 as a dominant run blocker and reliable pass catcher in short yardage situations. Given the current salary cap situation, I would love H. Hurst to come back for the three-headed monster, but tight end provides depth at a high blocking attributes to the run game. Woo! All right, that was a lot of stuff. Good insight here from Eduardo. Wow, I like that kind of breakdown of this draft. So the actual players he took were Tyler Linderbaum at 14, the center, Daniel Falele, offensive tackle at 45, Darian Beavers, linebacker at 76, Nick Bonito, edge at 99, Kobe Bryant, corner 108, Tyler Beatty, running back 117, John Ridgeway, interior defensive lineman 126, Max Mitchell, offensive tackle 138, Nick Cross, safety 140, and Daniel Bellinger, tight end at 194. So yeah, the combination of Linderbaum and Falele is very intriguing. And I've said before that, I don't know how great of a scheme fit Linderbaum is for this offense. It feels like he's not the best, but that doesn't mean he can't thrive in this system. Just because Linderbaum isn't this A+ 100% fit. Like, is any player really an 100% fit for an offense or a defense or a team? I don't know. So I like the back-to-back offensive linemen, but what Eduardo does here is he doesn't get too carried away with the whole needs versus overcompensating for needs. Like, again, I think 3 offensive linemen is the sweet spot. Eduardo has 3 offensive linemen here with Max Mitchell. He has a linebacker, an edge, a corner, a running back, interior defensive lineman, tight end. He hits on all the needs. And that's a really big part in this. And as we get closer to free agency and the Ravens start to make some moves, that's going to change a little bit. But for what Eduardo has right now with all the needs the Ravens do have at the moment, he hits on all of them, but he does it while taking some of the best players who will be on the board at that time. And that's what I love about these mock drafts and all the different scenarios that we have. So great job there by Eduardo, and especially a shout out to all the writing he did there to break it down. So that's all the time we have for mock drafts today. Unfortunately, we're going to probably wrap that up. And if you didn't hear a mock draft right out today, again, I apologize, but we are going to be diving into another mock draft Monday on Monday's show. But we also have a Friday show coming up that's going to be jam-packed with Ravens content, but that's all I have here today on Locked On Ravens. I'm going to get back here tomorrow. Of course, it's Ravens football. What else could it be here on Locked On Ravens? Thank you for listening. So stay tuned for our Friday show, and I will see you tomorrow.